guys, tonight we are going to now jump back into our study called Even Though here in the book of Philippians. We've been working through the book of Philippians, and we've been asking this question. It's been really simple, right? What in the world is bringing Paul joy in the midst of these trials, right? I feel like you guys got quiet real quick. Everybody still with me? I mean, I'm grateful. Thank you for listening. Yeah, I appreciate it. So we've been asking this question, right? Like what in the world did Paul... Stupid microphone. What in the world brought Paul joy in the midst of this thing? You guys remember, we're talking about the book of Philippians, which is written to the church in Philippi, right? And Paul wrote this thing from where? Prison, jail, all of the above. That works, right? He wrote this thing from prison, in jail, right? And here he is the entire time talking about, man, I'm pumped. I am so excited. I'm so joyful. I'm rejoicing in this. I'm happy about this. I'm happy about this. And we read that and we're like, hold on, time out, dude. The circumstances you're facing do not justify anything like joy. Why are you so happy? Why are you so joyful? And so that's what we've been talking about. So tonight we're going to continue that here in chapter 2 of Philippians. And I've entitled it tonight, Friends Worth a Fortune. Friends Worth a Fortune. Oh, how cute. Tommy looked at Kenzie and they held hands. That was sweet.
Friendship goals.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Friendship goals. Hashtag them. Right? Friends Worth a Fortune. We're going to be reading verses 19 down through verse number 30 here in the book of Philippians. So if you haven't been with us, let me recap really quickly what we've talked about in the past, I guess, over the series. We talked about how Paul found joy first, there in chapter 1, in spiritual faithfulness. We talked all about that. Week number 2, how he found joy in gospel proclamation. Week number 3, in ultimate deliverance. 3 weeks ago, we talked about how he found joy in humble unity. And then tonight, we're talking about how he finds joy in godly friendships. So let me just warn you guys from the get-go, okay? By the end of this thing, it's going to be very practical, okay? You guys are going to have a list of things that you can actually look at and say, do my friends qualify? Do I qualify as a friend on this list? And it's going to be a bit uncomfortable because we're going to set some high standards. Because listen, guys, as young adults, it's about time we raise our standards when it comes to this, right? And I'm pumped. I'm fired up for it. So let's get into it, man. We're going to be in Philippians chapter 2. Start here in verse number 19. And when we left off 3 weeks ago, we left off in verse 11. Now, in case you haven't done math in a while, 11 and 19 aren't next to each other, okay? There's a gap there. And that is because Brother J.B. Baldridge is going to be preaching that passage in between. He was supposed to 2 weeks ago, but then we had to temporarily just kind of put things on pause. And so he's going to be here either next week or the week after, filling us in on that. So we are going to go back, but we're going to pick up in verse number 19 here, and we're going to finish this chapter. And as we do, I want to point out two things, all right? This is not a really complicated outline, but it really helps us see things kind of holistically. The first thing I want to point out is this. We're going to see that Paul has a crazy amount of confidence in his buddy Timothy. All right? A crazy amount of confidence in his buddy Timothy. Look at verse number 19 with me. Paul says this, "But I trust in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy shortly unto you, that I also may be of good comfort when I know your state." Here's what Paul says. He says, hey guys, I want to send you Timothy pretty soon. Like pretty quick. I'm going to send him so that way he can find out how everything's going, make sure you guys are doing okay, and he can get back to me and let me know how things are happening. Again, keep in mind that he's writing from a prison cell, right? Which means this. Paul can't go do this himself. He's like, man, I need somebody to go do this. He's like, Timothy, go hop on a plane or a camel or whatever you hop on back in the day, right? And go visit this church and let me know how they're doing. And Paul says this, because I will be comforted by knowing your state, right? And then check out verse number 20. Here's where it gets good. And we're going to read this quick, and then we're going to come back and kind of dissect it a bit. Verse 20 says this, "For I have no man like-minded who will naturally care for your state. For all seek their own, and not the things which are Jesus Christ." Paul says, I don't have anybody else like Timothy. He says that is so like-minded like I am, who thinks the way I do, who cares for you the way that I do. That's what he's saying. He said, there's no one else like him that I know that cares for you to the same degree. He says, and everyone else, look at verse number 21, says, man, people are just concerned about themselves. He says, but Timothy, he's actually concerned about the things which are the Lord's. That's super important. And then look at verse number 22. He says this, but you know the proof of him, that as a son with the Father, he has served with me in the gospel. I love this, man. He's talking. You ever had somebody be your wingman a little bit? Guys, you know what I'm talking about? You're like, hey, bro, talk me up, right? I need you to talk me up a bit, right? And then someone just is terrible at it, right? They make you sound like the biggest loser ever. You're like, dude, come on, right? Paul's starting to do that. He's like, I'm going to send you Timothy because he's awesome. He thinks like me. He loves you guys. He's like, hold on. He said, I don't need to tell you guys this. He says, you know his reputation. He says, you know what he's about. He served with me like a son with a father. He served with me in the gospel. You know exactly who Timothy is. And you know what he's about. I love that, man. He doesn't even have to be the hype man, the wing man, right? Because Timothy's got that reputation. That's a big part we're going to talk about here in a second. And then verse 23, he says, him therefore I hope to send presently, so soon as I shall see how it will go with me. But I trust in the Lord that I also myself shall come shortly. I love this, man, because the wording's kind of confusing here in the King James. And basically, here's what Paul is saying. He's saying, as soon as I find out what's going to happen to me, right, whether I'm going to be released, whether I'm going to be kept, whether I'm going to be killed, as soon as I find that out, I'm going to send Timothy, regardless of what it is. He says, but I'm confident that I'm going to be coming with him, right? So I'm going to send Timothy to you, and I have full confidence in him. You're like, Austin, cool, that's awesome and stuff, but kind of seems like minor details. They're literally talking about like sending messengers, right? Like this isn't really all that cool. Wait for it, okay? Because it's very important. So the first thing we saw is Paul's his confidence in Timothy, and then the next thing we're going to see here in the rest of the chapter is his gratefulness for Epaphroditus. Everybody say Epaphroditus. Do you know how hard it is to spell that over and over when you're making sermon notes? It is terrible. We just had a name like Timothy, and now we go to Epaphroditus. I'm like, come on, Paul, find some simpler names for friends. You know what I'm talking about? And it sounds kind of like a disease. Well, probably, right? You know what I mean, though? Like coronavirus, Epaphroditus. Like, that's way too similar. You know what I mean? Tendinitis. There's just too much, okay? But here's the good news. He's a really great guy, right? Minus the name, right? He's a great dude, and we find out all about it here in verse number 25. Read it with me. He says this, yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother and companion in labor and fellow soldier, but your messenger, and he that ministered to my wants. I love this. He's like, although I haven't sent Timothy yet, I did decide to send you Epaphroditus, right? And his name may be hard to say, but he's a great guy. Because he starts listing off all the things that Epaphroditus is. He says he's my brother. Right? Not biologically, we'll get to that, right? He's my brother. He says he's a fellow laborer, right? He is a fellow soldier. He said he was your messenger. So here's the deal, guys. When we get to the end of Philippians, we're going to find that this whole thing, this whole letter, was kind of sparked by a gift, a financial gift that this church sent to Paul. Everybody say, money. That's really what sparked this thing. Was Paul was needing some support, and this church said, you know what, we're going to give you a gift, man. And so they send him this gift, and when they did so, they guess what, guys? They didn't have they didn't have Venmo, right? They didn't like write a check, put it in the mail. They didn't have UPS to take anything, right? They had to send a literal dude to walk with this thing, right? To take it all the way to Paul while he's in prison. And Epaphroditus is that dude. Right? He's the one who actually brought the gift. And that's what he says. He says, you sent him as your messenger, and he's the one that ministered to my needs. Right? You sent him on behalf of your church to me in order to give me this gift. And so he's very grateful for this ministry, and I love it, man. And here's the cool part, is Paul is writing this letter that we're reading called Philippians, right? And he's actually sending it with someone else to take it back to the church so they can read it. You know who's most likely carrying this letter that we're literally reading tonight? Epaphroditus. He's the one carrying this thing. He's the middleman, right? He's the one carrying this thing back to the church. It's so cool to think about it in that way. Look at verse number 26, though. Here's some more info on Epaphroditus. He says, for he longed after you all, and was full of heaviness because that you had heard that he had been sick. This is no fun. Again, Epaphroditus, he wanted to go back to his church, to his family, to his people, because he was really burdened, because they had heard that he had been really sick, right? Have you ever woken up or received a text message about someone you care about that has something urgent, and you're just filled with anxiety, in an instant? You know what I mean? Miss Marsha raised her hand. She told me this morning she woke up to a text message that just simply said, "Alex has died," which is very serious, right? And so it turns out that she's been working with someone through crisis relief ministry, working with some people there that someone passed away. But she immediately thought that text was talking about Alex, our Alex. And she told me, she said, I was scared. She said, my heart was pounding. I was so nervous. Have you been there? You've seen, even if it's misinformation, or maybe it's serious, you know what that's like to have that heaviness. Man, that's what this church was feeling, right? There was this heaviness because they got word that the dude who walked all that way to give this gift to Paul, he is now fallen sick. And you're like, Austin, it's probably not even that bad. No, it's pretty bad. Look, read verse 27. Paul says, for indeed he was sick, nigh or close unto death. But God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. He says, you guys have heard that he's sick, and you heard right, because the dude almost died. But, he said, God spared his life. He said, not only was God merciful on him, he said, God was merciful on me by not taking him, because that would have just added to it, right? That would have just piled on. And so Paul said, you guys were right. So, verse 28, I sent him therefore the more carefully, that when you see him again, you may rejoice, and that I may be less sorrowful. There is our favorite word for the study, right? Rejoice. But now he's not even talking about it himself. He's talking about the church rejoicing. Why? Because this dude's come back. Epaphroditus has made his way back when he almost died on this journey, right? And so now he says, when he gets there, I want you guys to rejoice, and it's going to fill me with less sorrow. I will be joyful as well. Verse 29, receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation, because for the work of Christ he was close unto death, not regarding his life, to supply your lack of service towards me. He says this, man, I love this. Now he's being the hype man. Now he's being the wingman. He says, hey, when this dude shows back up, you guys better rejoice. He says, you guys better honor this man, because he literally risked his life to bring this to me. He laid his life, he said he regarded not his own life in order to serve the Lord by serving Paul through the church. What an incredible testimony. And that's the end of the chapter tonight. And so that's all we're going to read. And I know you're like, Austin, it's kind of weird. That seems like a lot of background details. It feels like we just read someone's text messages with not really all that much important information. You know what I mean? Like, hey, when are you going to be home? That kind of stuff, right? That's what it feels like we just read. And here's what I love about it, man, is on the surface it doesn't look like much, but it is so much. Because I know we don't know these people, and so we're like, who cares about their traveling schedule, right? Who cares about that? But nonetheless, man, this is the kind of passage we normally skip over to get to the good stuff. But the truth is, this holds a lot for us tonight, and here's why. Here's why. Stay with me. Here's just for a few more minutes, and I'll wrap it up. Here's why. Because it gives us a window into another facet, another area where Paul finds joy. Where he found joy. He was rejoicing, and he was so excited about these two men. You know why? Because the truth is this. Even though he was suffering, even though Paul was imprisoned, even though he was in jail, he found joy in God's gift of good friends. In God's gift of good friends. Yes, he was suffering. Yes, he was hurting. Yes, he was limited. And no doubt life did not look like he wanted it to. But he rejoiced. He was surrounded by good men, good friends who brought him joy in the midst of the trial. So even though he suffered, he found joy in godly friendship. Which reminds me of this tonight. It just reminds me of this simple principle. And I couldn't help but think it as I was studying. The truth is this: good friends are one of God's greatest gifts. The inverse of that is bad friends are one of life's greatest pains. You know what I'm talking about? You guys have had good friends, right? Man, a good friend, there's nothing like a good friend. When you get down, when you're discouraged, when life's beating you up, there's someone there to walk with you, to hold you up, to encourage you. Right? There's nothing like that, having that good friend. We've also had the inverse of that. Right? People backstab us that we thought were friends. And here's the truth, guys. There's a wound that comes from friendship that is kind of unlike anything else. It hurts, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. You've been hurt by friends. It takes time to heal. There's also friends that don't fill us with joy even when we're suffering. They just add to the sorrow, right? They add to the sorrow. And so tonight that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to break it down here, what made them these godly good friends and the example that we're going to look to. But let me say this before we jump into it, okay? Because inevitably some of you thought this when I started talking about friendship. You're like, this again? Right? Like, I remember the friendship talk from middle school, bro. Like, this is the stuff that people used to... You know what I'm talking about? You remember those talks where people would say something that was true, but kind of cliche? You know what I mean? Like, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. That kind of stuff. It's good stuff, but we hear it so much. Or right, you will become what your friends are, or what, all of that stuff, right? We hear that a lot. And listen guys, here's what we think. We think that as we get older, we don't need that stuff anymore. Like, Austin, I'm a young adult, bro. Like I've got responsibility, I've got stuff going on. You're talking to me about friendships. Like, what is this, 7th grade? And we convince ourselves that it doesn't matter. But I have a newsflash for you tonight. Okay? Very important what I'm about to say. Okay? Who you surround yourself with always matters. You don't outgrow that. You don't. There's not like some age where you attain and you're like, now I don't have to worry about who's around me. Like, I would actually argue this, guys, that at our age, at our stage, at our phase of life, it matters even more. Because we're making decisions about the rest of our life now. And it matters who is influencing those. Right? Who we surround ourselves matters, especially now. So the question becomes this: what kind of people are good friends, and how do I know what kind of people I should surround myself with? Well, it just so happens that we just read the answer to that. We just didn't notice it. We were too busy on the traveling schedule, right? But there's so much info here that we can break down and see. And so, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at Paul and why he rejoiced in his friends. And when we look at that, when we look at what made them good friends to Paul, listen very closely, we find insight into what kind of friends, what kind of people we should surround ourselves with today. All right? So quickly, guys, I'm going to fly through these. Surround yourself with people who, on a couple different levels, we're going to talk about it. These are the kind of people, these are the marks that you're looking for when you're picking your inner circle. And so let me make this note before we start even dissecting this. One, I'm not talking about anybody that doesn't meet the qualifications we're about to talk about that you just disregard and avoid. Okay? That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying like you take the other sidewalk when this person walks by because you're like, I know how you live your life, right? Like nothing like that, right? Like I'm talking here about the inner circle. When I say surround yourself, I'm talking about the people that you share your life with. We all have close friends, right? Then we have friends, and then we have acquaintances, right? And there's all sorts of categories, right? With coworkers and classmates and Facebook friends. That's like its own category now, right? We all have way more friends on Facebook than we actually have, and we all know it. It's okay, right? And so like what I'm talking about here is your close circle. The people that you spend your life with, that you share your heart with, that you talk about your goals with, these kind of people. That's who I'm talking about you need to surround yourself. Because here's the truth. If people don't meet these qualifications, you're still called to be around them and to love them. Because how else are they going to know Jesus? Right? So don't misunderstand what I'm saying as we get this thing started. So, if we're going to do this right, if we're going to find joy in godly friendships, we've got to surround ourselves with people who first demonstrate an ordinary concern. Demonstrate an ordinary concern. Verse 20 said this. Paul said, I have no one like him. I have no man like-minded who will naturally care for your state. That word naturally, if I can find it here, it's a fancy Greek word that is actually pronounced nasios. Everybody say nasios. Make that face with it. It's more fun if you do it. Right? Nasios, which means sincerely. And so here's the deal. Timothy, when he's talking, he's saying, hey guys, I want to send you Timothy because I have no one else like him who will care for you guys. Paul was rejoicing in Timothy because Timothy was a man who had an unordinary concern for other people. You say, how was it unordinary? In two ways. First way is it was Christ-like. And that's that word naturally, the nasios that we were just talking about. That means this. It means sincerely, authentically, right? Meaning this, guys, look, that Timothy didn't care about people just when it benefited him, right? It was sincere, right? It was authentic. He actually cared about these people, even though it really had little to no impact on his own life. He cared for them. He actually cared. But not only was this concern unordinary because it was Christ-like, but secondly, because it was Christ-centered, right? Look at verse number 21. For all seek their own, not the things which are Jesus Christ. He's saying this, I'm confident to send you Timothy because I know that he's concerned about the things of God. Right? Everybody else is just seeking their own. They're trying to raise themselves, trying to grow themselves, give their own reputation. But he's concerned about the things that God is concerned about. He's concerned. So his concern was Christ-like, and it was Christ-centered. And so here's the deal, man. Listen closely. It is imperative. Everybody look right at me. It is imperative that you surround yourself with people who actively demonstrate a care for other people and for the things of God. That's important. It is massively important. Because here's the deal. If you do not, I can assure you that they will not help you grow in your concern for the things of God. They're not going to help you grow into something that that they currently don't possess or don't even care about. You have to find people that are concerned about the things of God and about other people. And here's the truth, man. It's not hard to tell. Okay? Just be honest for a second. It's not. The things people say about other people when they're not around, that's a flag, bro. Notice what they say. Notice that. Notice how committed they are to the things of God. Man, is serving in the church a priority? Is growing in their faith? Is growing in their knowledge of God's Word a priority in their life? If it's not, they're clearly not seeking the things that are the Lord's. And here's what I'm saying, man. They have no business being your close circle of friends if they're not concerned about the things of God, because they are not going to help you grow in that. They're not going to help you grow in that. I know that sounds really harsh, right? Because I'm not saying that we avoid them or we put some sort of scarlet letter on them, like, stay away, kind of that thing. Again, love people, care for people who don't live like this. But all I'm asking is this. Be careful about the people you allow to influence you. That's what I'm talking about. Don't give someone the right to influence you when you know that they're going to influence you the wrong way. Man, that sounds really harsh, Austin. Right? We're young adults. Let's grow up. These are standards, man. If you're going to follow Jesus the way He's called you to, this is part of it. Drawing these lines. Loving people when they fail to meet them, but holding them to it. Truth and grace. That's what Jesus is about. Read the Gospels. All right? So they have to demonstrate an unordinary concern. Secondly, surround yourself with people who possess a godly reputation. You know what I mean? This is probably my favorite part of this whole passage. Paul says, I don't even have to back my boy up. You know exactly who he is. You know his reputation. He says he's proven it. You know the proof of him. He's proven who he is. Right? That's a big deal. What do other people say about the people you hang out with? About the people you give influence to? Now look, let me be careful, okay? Reputations are not everything, okay? Right? Good people have bad reputations because of things like rumors, because of agendas, all sorts of stuff. All sorts of things can go wrong. But if there is an overwhelming majority of people who look at someone and say, you know what? I recognize that they don't really care about the things of God, then that reputation precedes them, then you might want to be concerned about that. Seriously. Right? It sounds harsh, I know, but it's God's Word. They have to possess a godly reputation. Man, because here's the deal. like I'm going to say for all of it, if they don't possess and they don't care about a godly reputation, look guys, they will never help you attain one. And that matters. That matters. Right? Possess a godly reputation. This stupid microphone. It's not my day. Hey. All of you guys go look that up in the middle of the service when I just pick it up and say, hey. All right. Verse number 23. Check this out, man. Not only do they need to possess a godly reputation, need to live worthy of your confidence. This is big, man. This is big. Live worthy of your confidence. Verse 23. He says, him, therefore. Right? Therefore, meaning because of what I just said, because I know you know his reputation, I know his heart, I know his concern, therefore, I have no issue sending him. This is a big deal. Do you realize that this is what Paul does like with his whole life? This is the highest priority for him. Ministering to churches and seeing people saved. And he's saying, I trust this dude enough to go on my behalf as if it were myself. It's a big deal. That's a lot of confidence that he's placing in this young Timothy. And I love the insight we get into his friendship here. Paul knew that Timothy could be trusted with important issues. And he had lived a life worthy of confidence. I love this, man. So here's the question. Are the people most close to you worthy of this kind of confidence? Can you trust them with life or death issues? Can you rely on them to do what needs to be done? To serve with you, to go where you need them to go? Can they be trusted this way? Right? Do they live a life worthy of confidence? Number 4, as I wrap this thing up. Now we're moving on to Mr. Hard Name Epaphroditus, and he shows us that we need to surround ourselves with people who play their part in God's mission. Play their part in God's mission. Look at verse 25 one more time. It says, yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother, and companion in labor and fellow soldier, but your messenger and he that ministered to my wants. I love this, man. Because he just starts listing off all these things about Epaphroditus. First he calls him his brother, like I said, not a biological thing, right? What he's talking about here is a spiritual union. That Epaphroditus is a part of the family of God, as is Paul. And because of that, they are united in Jesus as brothers. Right? That is foundational for our friendships, guys. That's a non-negotiable thing. Those that are most influencing you need to be most influenced by Jesus. And that's not going to happen unless they know him. Right? So he calls him brother. He calls him a fellow laborer, right? Someone who wasn't a sideline Christian. He worked. He served. He called him a soldier. Again, not a literal thing, right? But spiritually speaking, he was someone who was out there. He was in the fight. He was fighting the good fight, right? He was promoting the name of Jesus, sharing the gospel, serving people in a dark and wicked world. He was a soldier. Not only that, he was a messenger and a minister. And I love this, man. Again, he had actually come all this way just to give a gift to him on behalf of the church. Can I tell you something, guys? Look. That's not really glamorous, bro. Like the dude that's chosen to, hey, you look like you could walk a long way. Like, take this gift. That's not a glamorous thing. He's not preaching in front of like 10,000 people and there's all sorts of revivals and things like that, all sorts of people being baptized and churches started. He's walking and he's taking a gift. But here's the deal, man. He did what was asked of him. He did his part. There was a willingness to serve Jesus by serving his bride, by being a part of what his people were doing, right? You played his part in God's mission. I'm going to ask the same questions. Your close circle of friends, are they even like in any sort of fraction of a way concerned about the mission of God, about what God is doing here and around the world? About the redemptive work that Jesus supplies. Are they concerned about that? Do they serve faithfully? Because I promise you, you're going to be more likely to miss your part in this mission by hanging around people that aren't a part of it. And that's not something you want to give up, man. You want to be a part of what God is doing. So surround yourself with people who are, right? Surround yourself with people who are. And this is a big deal. And let me just be honest before I wrap this up. Because I have a lot of friends and I know a lot of people who I've seen God do some incredible things with. Look at me, guys, for just a second. I've seen a fire in them. And I've seen them get around people who absolutely stole that. And it breaks my heart. Because it doesn't have to be that way. Right? I've seen it happen over and over again. Someone's on fire for the Lord, ready to do something, growing in their faith, and they surround themselves with people who only discourage it, and they just fall back. Man, don't let that happen. Surround yourself with people who are going to encourage you to play your part. And then lastly, and this is my favorite point of all, surround yourself with people who risk their all for the Savior. Who risk their all for the Savior. Verse number 30. Because for the work of Christ he was close unto death, not regarding his life. He says, I rejoice in Epaphroditus because he was so willing to serve Jesus that he disregarded everything else, including his own life, to make sure that he was doing what was right. Find you people like that. Right? Live your life with people like that. Here's the best advice. If I could summarize it, if you've been asleep this whole time, wake back up and listen to this one thing we're about to say, and then we'll be done. Best piece of advice I got. Okay? Surround yourself with people who love Jesus more than you do. Because they are only going to help you love Him more. And not less. Surround yourself with people who love Jesus more than you do. Seriously, man. And so here's what I want you to do tonight. I know it seems really harsh, and we live in a world of tolerance where we're like, Austin, you can't say that kind of stuff. We've got to accept people as they are. Man, we're not even talking about that tonight, okay? We're talking about who you let influence your life and the friendships and the bonds that you're making. We're not talking about loving people. We're not talking about growing with people, caring about people. We get that. I've already made that note. I'm going to keep making it because it's that important, right? Open arms. We get that. But when you look at this list, ask yourself this. Do the people that I give the most time in my life qualify? And here's the deal, guys. In all honesty, none of us really do. I get that. We all struggle with this. Here's the deal, man. It's about striving for it. Ask yourself this. The people most close to me in my life, is this even a concern for them? Do they strive for anything like this? Right? Is this even on their radar? Because if not, here's what you need to do. You need to give them some space. I'm not asking you to excommunicate them, to throw them out of your life. I'm asking you to not let them influence you and instead find people that will grow you towards Jesus. Grow with you in Jesus. Right? Do your friends strive for this? Because if not, you might need to hit the brakes a little bit. To say, hey, you know what, man, I'm trying to sort out some priorities. And I love you, man, but here's what my life is going to be like, and I want you to be a part of it. Are you in or you out? And then love them. And here's the catch tonight. I built up this whole thing about, man, here's the standard you need to set. But here's the real question tonight. When other people think of you, do you qualify? Ouch. Are you this kind of friend? Do you provide this kind of relationship? That hurts. Because I think the majority of us would say, man, I struggle. I hear you, man. I struggle. I hear you. But here's the deal, guys. We've got to strive for it. Strive for it. You know why? Because if we're searching for joy, right? Not some passive happiness that comes through whatever it may be, whatever pleasure the world is promising. If we're looking for something that lasts, something that gets us through a lot of dark days while we're sitting in a prison cell like Paul, it's going to be godly friends. Not the people we got high with or drank with or had sex with at a party. That's just the truth of it. That told us to seek our pleasure. They're going to be people that told us to seek Jesus. That's who's going to get us through those dark days. That's where God gives us that joy. Because the truth is, right, this kind of friendship is worth a fortune. It's worth more than we can imagine. So I don't want you guys to leave discouraged. I don't want you to leave here and go get on Facebook and be like, I can't be friends with any of you guys, okay? Austin said I can't be friends with you. Don't do that, right? Instead, leave this place and commit to this. Say, I'm going to be this kind of person for someone else. And I'm going to really seriously consider who I allow in my life to influence me. Right? That's what it takes to be mature in Jesus. And it's time for us to grow up a bit. So let's do it. Let's not be discouraged. Let's not be down about it. Let's be about it. Let's do it. Go ahead and bow.